The ceremonial hall of the Galactic Parliament stretched for miles, its crystal dome reflecting the light of 1,000 suns from across the known universe. Ambassador Marcus Chen stood at attention, his ceremonial rifle held perfectly vertical against his shoulder. The weapon was ancient by galactic standards, a human design from Earth's 22nd century, but it fired plasma bolts that could pierce through 6 inches of titanium plating. Every member of the Royal Guard carried one during official ceremonies, a reminder that humanity's place in the Galactic Council had been earned through strength and determination. Today was supposed to be a simple diplomatic gathering. The Valix Empress was presenting her latest grandchild to the assembled representatives, a traditional ceremony that happened once every solar cycle. Marcus had attended 12 such events in his 5 years as Royal Guard, and they always followed the same pattern: speeches, formal presentations, polite applause from beings with various numbers of appendages. Then everyone would retreat to the banquet halls for refreshments that ranged from delicious to potentially toxic, depending on your species. But something felt different this time. Marcus could sense tension in the air, thick enough to cut with a vibroblade. The other guards felt it too. Sarah Williams, stationed 15 feet to his left, kept shifting her weight imperceptibly from foot to foot. Johann Schmidt, visible in his peripheral vision to the right, had his jaw clenched so tight the muscles in his neck stood out like cables. The child, Prince Louis of the Valix dynasty, was crying. Not just crying, actually, but wailing with the kind of lung power that suggested the young royal had inherited his species' famous vocal abilities. The sound echoed off the crystal dome, amplified and distorted until it resembled a siren more than a child's distress. Marcus fought the urge to wince. His enhanced eardrums, a standard modification for Royal Guard members, protected him from permanent damage, but couldn't entirely filter out the discomfort. Camilla, the child's nursemaid and a member of the Drazen species, bent over the floating cradle that held Prince Louis. Her 6 arms moved in practiced patterns, trying to soothe the infant with traditional Valix lullaby gestures. The Drazen were known throughout the galaxy as the finest caregivers, their multiple limbs and natural patience making them ideal for managing the young of almost any species. And Camilla had served the royal family for 30 years, raising 3 generations of Valix nobility. Marcus watched from his position, his face a perfect mask of professional neutrality. That was what the job required. Stand still, look impressive, protect the dignitaries if anything went wrong, and never, ever react to what was happening around you unless it presented a clear and present danger. He had been trained for 2 years before being allowed to carry the ceremonial rifle. Another year before, he was permitted to stand guard at major events. The discipline was ingrained so deeply, it had become reflexive. The crying intensified. Prince Louis, barely 3 months old in Valix years, which translated to about 18 months in Earth Standard, thrashed in his cradle with surprising strength. The anti-gravity field that kept him suspended flickered slightly, a sign that the child's developing telekinetic abilities were already manifesting. That was good news for the royal family. Strong telekinetics often became powerful leaders among the Valix. Camilla's 4 eyes narrowed with concentration as she increased her efforts. Her lower arms adjusted the cradle's temperature controls, while her middle arms made soothing gestures, and her upper arms prepared a feeding bottle filled with a specialized nutrient mixture. The Drazen hummed softly, a subsonic frequency meant to calm agitated infants. Nothing worked. Prince Louis screamed louder. That was when Marcus noticed the camera drones. They were everywhere at these events, of course. Recording for posterity and broadcasting to the billions of beings across the galaxy who followed royal proceedings. But now they were focusing intently on Camilla and the crying prince. More than usual. More than made sense for a simple diplomatic ceremony. The Empress herself, a towering figure covered in iridescent scales that shifted through the visible spectrum, approached the cradle. Her face showed concern, the kind of maternal worry that transcended species barriers. She reached out one elegant claw toward her grandson, but protocol demanded she not interfere with the nursemaid's duties unless specifically requested. The Valaks took their traditions seriously. Senator Thrain of the Krell Confederation leaned toward his aide, whispering something Marcus couldn't hear. The aide immediately pulled out a data pad and began typing rapidly. Marcus felt his stomach tighten. The Krell were opportunists, always looking for leverage in political negotiations. Whatever they were planning, it wouldn't be good. Camilla's humming grew more desperate. She cycled through every calming technique Marcus had seen her use over the years. The prince remained inconsolable. Sweat began to form on her scaled brow, glistening under the artificial lights. Her reputation was on the line. 30 years of perfect service, and she couldn't soothe one crying child in front of the entire galactic parliament. Then it happened. So quickly that most beings in the hall missed it entirely. Camilla's upper right arm moved in a sharp, decisive motion. Her hand made contact with Prince Louis's back, between his developing wing buds. It wasn't a gentle pat. It was firm, forceful, clearly intended to shock the child out of his crying fit. The technique worked. Prince Louis gasped, his wailing cut off mid-shriek. For exactly 3 seconds, blessed silence filled the ceremonial hall. Then the crying resumed, but quieter now, more manageable. The crisis seemed to have passed. Marcus saw it all. His enhanced vision, another modification for Royal Guard duty, could track movements that happened in fractions of a second. He had seen the strike, measured its force, analyzed its impact. By human standards, it was nothing. A firm pat, the kind a frustrated parent might give an overtired child. No injury, no real harm, just enough surprise to interrupt a tantrum. But the galaxy wasn't operating on human standards, and Senator Thrain had seen it too, or more accurately, his recording equipment had captured it in perfect detail. The senator stood, his bulk rising from the curved seating area like a mountain emerging from the sea. His voice, amplified by the hall's acoustic systems, boomed across the assembly. I move for an immediate inquiry into the treatment of Prince Louis by his nursemaid Camilla. The visual records will show that she struck the child, an action that violates 16 separate galactic statutes regarding the care of royal offspring. Chaos erupted. Delegates from 100 worlds began talking at once, some in support of the inquiry, others demanding to see the evidence first. The Empress's scales flashed from concerned blue to angry crimson. Camilla stood frozen, her 6 arms hanging limp at her sides, her face showing the kind of shock that comes from having your entire world collapse in an instant. Marcus felt Sarah tense beside him. He knew what she was thinking because he was thinking it too. This was wrong. This was a setup. The Krell had been waiting for any excuse to embarrass the Valaks Empress, who had blocked their latest territorial expansion proposal just 2 weeks ago. They had probably been monitoring Camilla for days, waiting for the smallest misstep they could blow out of proportion. The protocol was clear. Royal Guards did not interfere in political matters. They did not speak unless spoken to. They certainly did not insert themselves into delicate diplomatic situations. Marcus had sworn an oath to follow these rules without question. He also remembered why he had joined the Royal Guard in the first place. It wasn't for the prestige or the ceremonial rifle or the enhanced abilities. It was because humanity had a reputation in the galaxy as being stubborn, principled, and unwilling to stand by when injustice was happening right in front of them. That's what HFY meant to Marcus. Not that humans were stronger or smarter or better than other species, but that when the moment came to choose between following orders and doing what was right, humans had a track record of choosing right. The ceremonial rifle suddenly felt heavy in his hands. Not physically heavy. The weapon weighed less than 6 pounds thanks to its carbon fiber construction, but symbolically heavy. It represented everything he was supposed to be as a royal guard: disciplined, obedient, a perfect soldier who followed orders without question. Marcus made his decision, but he stepped forward, breaking formation for the first time in 5 years of service. The movement was slight, barely 6 inches, but in the rigid world of ceremonial protocol, it might as well have been a mile. Johann sucked in a sharp breath. Sarah whispered his name, a warning and a question all at once. The rifle fell from his shoulder. Not dropped, that would have been undignified, but deliberately placed on the ground, laid down with the same precision he had maintained it with for all these years. The sound of metal touching marble echoed through the hall, cutting through the chaos like a gunshot. Every eye in the assembly turned to Marcus. The Empress stared at him with an expression he couldn't read. Senator Thrane's face twisted into something between satisfaction and confusion. Camilla looked at him with desperate hope, and as if this human guard she barely knew might somehow be her salvation. Marcus walked forward, his steps measured and calm. He passed the other guards, who remained frozen at attention. He moved between the rows of delegates, ignoring their startled reactions. He approached the floating cradle where Prince Louis still whimpered softly. "Ambassador Chen," the Empress's voice carried a warning tone. "You are out of position." "Yes, Your Majesty," Marcus replied, his voice steady. "I am. I apologize for the breach of protocol, but I have testimony to offer regarding the incident Senator Thrane has raised." The senator's eyes narrowed. "This is most irregular. Guards do not testify in parliamentary inquiries." "Human guards do when they have witnessed a miscarriage of justice," Marcus said. The words felt right, and even as he knew they were ending his career. "I have enhanced visual capabilities. I saw exactly what happened with Camilla and Prince Louis. I can provide detailed analysis if the assembly wishes to hear it." The hall fell silent. Marcus could hear his own heartbeat, steady despite the adrenaline flooding his system. This was it, the moment where everything changed. He had cast aside his rifle, broken his position, and challenged a senator in front of the entire galactic parliament. There was no going back now. The Empress studied him for a long moment, her scales shifting through colors that Marcus had learned to read during his years of service. Purple for curiosity, green for calculation, finally, gold for decision. "The assembly will hear the testimony of Ambassador Marcus Chen," she declared. Let the record show that he speaks of his own volition, not as a representative of the Royal Guard or the human delegation." Marcus nodded. "I understand, Your Majesty." He turned to face the assembly, very aware that he was standing in the center of the hall with no weapon, no backup, and no official authority. Just a human who had decided that silence was more dangerous than speaking up. "Members of the Galactic Parliament," he began, "I have observed Camilla in her duties for 5 years. I have seen her care for Prince Louis since his hatching with dedication that exceeds any standard I know. What happened today was not abuse. It was a practiced childcare technique used by many species, including my own, to interrupt a dangerous escalation in an infant's distress." Senator Thrane rose again. "The human guard is not a medical expert. He cannot determine what constitutes appropriate care for a Valak's child." "No," Marcus agreed. "But I can tell you about force and impact. My enhancements allow me to measure these things precisely. The contact Camilla made with Prince Louis registered at 0.3 newtons of force. To put that in perspective, the average Valak's greeting pat between adults measures at 2.1 newtons. What Camilla did was 7 times gentler than a casual, friendly gesture." Murmurs rippled through the assembly. Marcus pressed on. "Furthermore, I can testify to Prince Louis's response. His crying stopped. His heart rate, which I could monitor through thermal imaging, decreased from dangerous levels to normal ranges within 5 seconds. His telekinetic field stabilized. By every measurable metric, Camilla's intervention was successful and harmless." The Empress's scales shifted to a warm amber color that Marcus had learned meant approval. But Senator Thrain wasn't finished. "The law is clear," the Krell insisted. "Physical discipline of royal children is forbidden under any circumstances. The human's measurements are irrelevant. The act occurred. That is sufficient for charges." Marcus felt anger rising in his chest, but kept his voice level. "Then your law is foolish, Senator. It prioritizes technical compliance over actual well-being. Camilla could have let Prince Louis cry himself into a dangerous state rather than risk this accusation. Is that what the Galactic Parliament wants? Caregivers so afraid of being accused that they won't act in children's best interests?" The question hung in the air, and Marcus saw delegates exchanging glances, some nodding slowly. He had hit on something important, a question that resonated across species and cultures. Where was the line between protecting children and paralyzing those who cared for them? Ambassador Yuki Chen, no relation despite the shared surname, stood from the human delegation area. She was Marcus's superior officer, the woman who had approved his assignment to the Royal Guard. Her face showed a mixture of pride and exasperation. "The human delegation requests a 15-minute recess to consult with Ambassador Marcus Chen," she said formally. "Denied," Senator Thrain snapped. "The inquiry will proceed immediately." But the Empress raised one elegant claw. "Granted! This assembly will recess for 15 minutes. Ambassador Chen will report to the human delegation. Camilla will remain in my personal custody, pending the inquiry's conclusion." The gavel sounded, a crystalline chime that signaled official recess. Marcus bowed to the Empress, then turned and walked toward the human delegation area. His legs felt steady, but his mind was racing. He had just thrown away his career, possibly damaged human-Valix relations, and definitely violated about 50 different protocols. And he would do it again in a heartbeat if it meant preventing an innocent person from being persecuted for doing her job. The human delegation's private chamber was smaller than most species' quarters, a reflection of humanity's relatively recent admission to the Galactic Parliament. Ambassador Yuki Chen waited until the door sealed before speaking, her arms crossed and her expression unreadable. That was either the bravest or stupidest thing I've seen in 20 years of diplomatic service," she said. "I haven't decided which yet." Marcus stood at attention out of habit, though he no longer had a rifle to hold. "I understand I've created complications, Ambassador, but I couldn't stand by and watch an innocent person be destroyed for political gain." Yuki's expression softened slightly. "I know. That's the human in you. It's also what makes this situation so damn complicated." She activated a holographic display, showing news feeds from across the galaxy. Marcus's dramatic gesture was already spreading through the networks. "Breaking formation. Laying down your weapon. Challenging a senator. You've given the media enough content for a month." "I gave them the truth," Marcus said quietly. "Oh, the truth is a weapon too," Yuki replied. "And you've just handed it to everyone in the galaxy. Some will use it well, others won't." She pulled up another screen, this one showing polling data. Human approval ratings just jumped 6 points across the core worlds. Apparently, beings like the idea of a guard who cares more about justice than ceremony. Marcus hadn't expected that. "They do?" "Humans have a reputation, Marcus. We're the species that doesn't know when to quit, that fights for underdogs, that speaks up when everyone else stays silent. It's why some species love us, and others think we're dangerously unpredictable." Yuki paused, studying him. "Did you know that Camilla has a daughter?" The question caught Marcus off guard. "No, I didn't. She's a medical student on Drazen Prime, top of her class. She wants to be a pediatric surgeon. Do you know what happens to the families of people convicted of crimes against royalty in Valix space?" Marcus felt his stomach drop. "They share the punishment." 3 generations worth, Yuki confirmed. Camilla's daughter would lose her medical license, her education, her future. Her daughter's children, if she ever has any, would be barred from higher education. That's what you're fighting against. Not just one person's reputation, but an entire family's destiny. The weight of it settled on Marcus's shoulders. He had acted on instinct, on principle, on the gut-level human certainty that injustice had to be opposed. But he hadn't thought through all the implications, typical human, as some species might say, acting before thinking. "What do I do now?" he asked. Oyuki smiled for the first time since the recess began. "Now you go back out there and finish what you started. The Empress has requested you as an expert witness. Senator Thrain has filed 17 objections, but the parliamentary rules are on your side. You get to tell your story." "Will it be enough?" "I don't know," Yuki admitted. "The Krell have powerful allies. They've been building a coalition against the Valaks for months. This might be the excuse they need to push through their territorial claims, or it might backfire spectacularly when the galaxy sees them prosecuting a nursemaid over a gentle touch." She placed a hand on his shoulder. "But here's what I do know. You did the right thing. Whatever happens next, you stood up when it mattered. And that's worth more than any ceremonial position." The 15 minutes passed too quickly. Marcus returned to the chamber to find the atmosphere had shifted. More delegates had arrived, drawn by news of the spectacle. The gallery seats were packed with observers from dozens of species, all eager to witness the confrontation between human idealism and Krell political machinery. His rifle was gone from where he had laid it down. Someone had removed it, probably to avoid the symbolic reminder of his break from protocol. Marcus found that he didn't miss it. The weight of representing human values felt heavier and more important than any physical weapon. The Empress called the assembly to order. Her scales had settled into a neutral silver, the color of formal judgment. "This inquiry will now continue. Ambassador Marcus Chen has been recognized as an expert witness regarding the incident involving Camilla and Prince Louis. Senator Thrain, you may question the witness." The Krell senator approached with the confidence of someone who believed victory was inevitable. His species stood 8 feet tall on average, with thick armored plates covering most of their body. They had evolved on a high-gravity world where physical toughness meant survival. They valued strength, tradition, and the kind of rigid hierarchy that left no room for mercy or flexibility. "Ambassador Chen," Thrain began, his voice dripping with barely concealed contempt, "you claim that Camilla's actions were harmless, yet you also admit she struck the prince. How do you reconcile these statements?" Marcus kept his voice steady. "I don't claim her actions were harmless. Senator, I can prove it. I have recorded sensor data from my ocular implants showing the exact force, angle, and impact of the contact. I can provide this data to the Assembly's analytical systems for independent verification." That caught Thrain off guard. The senator hadn't expected hard evidence. "The law doesn't care about degrees of force. Any physical discipline is forbidden." "Then the law is designed to produce exactly this situation," Marcus countered. "A political weapon disguised as child protection. If the law truly cared about Prince Louis's well-being, it would focus on outcomes, not arbitrary rules about physical contact." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the assembly. Marcus saw several delegates nodding, particularly those from species that used physical touch in their parenting practices. He pressed his advantage. "I've reviewed the Valak's child protection statutes, Senator. All 16 of them that you cited. They were written 200 years ago, after a scandal involving actual abuse of a royal child by a caretaker. That abuser broke bones, caused permanent injury, and left psychological scars that lasted decades. The statutes were meant to prevent that kind of genuine harm." Marcus pulled up a holographic display showing the relevant legal text. "But over the years, these laws have been interpreted more and more strictly. Not because children were being harmed, but because strict interpretation gave politicians like you more power, more ways to threaten, to intimidate, to control. The laws stopped being about protecting children and became about controlling caregivers." Senator Thrain's armored plates clattered together, and a sign of agitation in Krell physiology. "You dare accuse me of political manipulation?" "I dare to state the obvious," Marcus replied. "You waited for this moment. Your recording drones were positioned perfectly to capture Camilla's actions from the most damning angle. You filed your motion within seconds of the incident, which means you had the legal documents prepared in advance. This wasn't about protecting Prince Louis. This was about embarrassing the Empress and advancing the Krell territorial agenda." The chamber erupted in chaos. Delegates shouted questions and accusations. The Empress's scales flashed through rapid color changes, showing her struggle to maintain composure. Senator Thrain's face twisted with rage. But Marcus wasn't finished. He had laid down his rifle for this moment, and he was going to make it count. "I want to tell you all about my grandmother," he said, raising his voice to cut through the noise. The unexpected personal turn caught everyone's attention. The chamber quieted. She raised 6 children on Earth during the Unification Wars. Food was scarce. Medicine was scarcer. She had to make impossible choices every day about how to keep her family alive. Marcus walked slowly as he spoke, making eye contact with delegates across the spectrum of species. "One of my uncles, when he was 3 years old, ran toward a collapsed building during a bombing raid. My grandmother grabbed him, pulled him back, and yes, she swatted his behind hard enough to make him cry. Hard enough to make him remember never to run toward danger again. That action, by Senator Thrain's logic, would be criminal. But it saved my uncle's life." He stopped in front of Camilla, who looked up at him with tear-filled eyes. "Humans understand something that gets lost in political maneuvering and legal technicalities. We understand that caring for children is messy, imperfect, and sometimes requires quick decisions that don't fit neatly into legal frameworks. We understand that the people who dedicate their lives to nurturing the young deserve support, not persecution." Marcus turned to face the Empress directly. "Your Majesty, I have no official standing in this inquiry. I've already sacrificed my position as a royal guard. I'm just a human who saw something wrong and couldn't stay silent. But I'm asking you to look at the evidence, not just the accusations. Look at Prince Louis now." The floating cradle had been brought into the chamber. The young prince slept peacefully, his breathing steady, his telekinetic field stable and calm. Camilla had managed to settle him completely during the recess, despite the stress of impending charges. That spoke to her skill and dedication more than any testimony could. "That is a healthy, safe, loved child," Marcus continued, "raised by someone who has given 30 years of her life to your family. I'm asking you to weigh that reality against political convenience." The Empress stood, her full height making her tower over everyone in the chamber. Her scales had turned to deep purple, the color of serious contemplation. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of centuries of royal authority. "This inquiry has revealed much about the state of our laws and our priorities. Ambassador Chen is correct. The child protection statutes were meant to prevent harm, not to create weapons for political warfare." She turned to Senator Thrain. "Your motion for prosecution is denied. Furthermore, I am calling for a comprehensive review of all child welfare laws to ensure they serve their intended purpose." Thrain's armor plates clattered furiously. "You cannot simply dismiss legal charges because a human made a pretty speech." "I can dismiss charges that are baseless and politically motivated," the Empress countered. "The evidence shows no harm to Prince Louis. The evidence shows 30 years of exemplary service by Camilla. The evidence shows that this entire inquiry was manufactured to serve Krell interests, not Valak's justice." She raised her voice, addressing the entire assembly. "Let this be understood clearly. My grandson is safe, healthy, and well cared for. Camilla will continue in her duties with my full confidence and gratitude. Any delegate who wishes to challenge this decision may do so through proper diplomatic channels, not through manipulation of child welfare laws." The gavel sounded. The inquiry was over. Camilla collapsed to her knees, her 6 arms covering her face as relief overwhelmed her. Marcus felt his own knees weaken slightly, but forced himself to remain standing. Senator Thrain stormed from the chamber, his delegation following behind. They had lost this battle, but Marcus knew the war was far from over. The Krell would find other ways to pressure the Valaks, other leverage points to exploit. That was the nature of galactic politics. But today, at least, justice had won, and a good person had been saved from a malicious prosecution. And the Empress approached Marcus, her scales shifting to warm gold. Ambassador Chen, or should I say, former Ambassador Chen, you have placed me in a difficult position. Marcus bowed deeply. I apologize, Your Majesty. I couldn't remain silent. I know, she said softly. That is precisely the problem. You cannot serve as a royal guard anymore. The position requires absolute adherence to protocol, and you have demonstrated that you value conscience over rules. She paused, and Marcus thought he detected amusement in her tone. However, I find myself in need of someone with exactly your qualities for a different position. Marcus looked up, surprised. Your Majesty? I am creating a new role, child welfare advocate. Someone who will review cases involving young beings across the Valaks territories and ensure that laws are being applied with wisdom, not just technical precision. Someone who isn't afraid to speak uncomfortable truths to power. Her scales rippled with definite amusement now. It's a human quality that I find I need more of in my government. Are you interested? The offer stunned Marcus into silence for a moment. He had expected consequences, punishment, perhaps deportation back to Earth, not a promotion to a position of greater responsibility. I would be honored, Your Majesty, he managed. Good. Your first assignment will be to work with legal scholars on revising our child protection statutes. I want laws that actually protect children, not politicians' ambitions. The Empress turned to Camilla, who had composed herself enough to stand. And I want Camilla to serve as an advisor on the project. Who better to guide child welfare policy than someone who has devoted her life to the work? Camilla bowed so deeply her forehead nearly touched the floor. Your Majesty is too kind. Your Majesty is too often surrounded by those who tell me what I want to hear, rather than what I need to know, the Empress corrected. That changes today. As the assembly dispersed, Marcus found himself surrounded by other guards. Sarah and Johann approached first, their expressions a mixture of respect and disbelief. That was insane, Sarah said, shaking her head. Absolutely insane and absolutely necessary. I wanted to do the same thing, but I didn't have the courage. We all wanted to, Johann added. You just acted first. That's very human of you. Marcus smiled. Is that a compliment or an insult? Both, Johann replied with a grin. Definitely both. Over the following weeks, news of the incident spread throughout the galaxy. The story took on different forms depending on who was telling it. Some painted Marcus as a reckless maverick who had gotten lucky. Others saw him as a hero standing up for the powerless. The truth, as usual, was more complicated than either version. What mattered most to Marcus was the result. Camilla kept her position and her reputation. Her daughter continued her medical studies without the shadow of prosecution hanging over her family. The child protection laws began a lengthy review process that would eventually make them more fair and more focused on actual child welfare. Marcus found himself in a role that suited him far better than standing at attention with a ceremonial rifle. He investigated cases across Valak space, identifying where laws were being abused and where genuine harm was being ignored. He worked with delegates from dozens of species, learning their approaches to child-rearing and finding common ground across vast cultural differences. The rifle he had laid down that day in the ceremonial hall was eventually mounted in a museum exhibit about pivotal moments in Galactic Parliament history. A small plaque beneath it read, Sometimes the most important action is to put down your weapon and speak the truth. Marcus visited the exhibit once, 6 months after the incident. He stood looking at the rifle for a long time, remembering the weight of it, the discipline it represented, and the life he had given up. He didn't regret it for a second. Ambassador Yuki Chen found him there, staring at his own small piece of history. "Having second thoughts?" she asked. "Not at all," Marcus replied. "I was just thinking about what that rifle represented. Following orders, maintaining discipline, being the perfect soldier." "And what do you represent now?" Yuki asked. Marcus considered the question carefully. "Something more important than perfect discipline. The idea that individuals matter more than systems, that justice is more valuable than political convenience, that sometimes you have to break the rules to do what's right." He smiled. "I guess I represent the human tendency to be stubborn and principled even when it's inconvenient." "Humanity, fuck yeah," Yuki said quietly. Marcus laughed. "Exactly." They stood together in silence for a moment, looking at the rifle that had become a symbol of something larger than either of them had anticipated. It represented a moment when one person had chosen conscience over compliance, when someone had decided that witnessing injustice and doing nothing was worse than the consequences of speaking up. It was the most human thing Marcus had ever done. And in a galaxy full of species with their own values and traditions, being stubbornly, persistently, courageously human turned out to be exactly what was needed. Prince Louis grew up hearing the story of the guard who laid down his rifle to defend his nursemaid. As a young adult, the prince would cite that moment as inspiration for his own reforms to Valak's justice systems. Camilla served the royal family for another 15 years before retiring with full honors. Her daughter became one of the most respected pediatric surgeons in the galaxy, known for her advocacy for children's rights. And Marcus continued his work, case by case, child by child, making the galaxy a slightly more just place, one difficult decision at a time. He never picked up a ceremonial rifle again. He didn't need to. His weapon now was the truth, spoken clearly and without fear, in the stubborn belief that doing the right thing mattered more than following orders. It was the human way, and in a galaxy that often valued conformity and political calculation, that made all the difference.